I saw somewhere Satya Nadella sharing that up to 30% of the code in Microsoft is shipped by AI.
It was really, really good. And that took around 45 to 50 minutes.
The engineering part is still with humans. Just the coding part is responsibly offloaded to AI.
It started working on it, and the output was really good for one-shotting the output from plan to ad.
This is about how to ship production grade software on an existing project. Hey, hi, I'm Chirag. This is Sachin.
Hi.
Welcome to our podcast. With all the AI breakthroughs that are happening, we felt confident that all the necessary building blocks are available to build a AI first solution to our customers. During the journey, Sachin briefly digressed and figured out how to make AI to write code. This few minutes is about that. Sachin, go ahead. How did you start?
So, see, when we were exploring like how to build our own AI agent, which our merchants can use, we wanted to explore how we can use AI only to make this whole product, right? So, we focused on exploring all the current offerings from AI, how much it's able to do, the limitations of the system. All of this we started exploring. We saw that there is a like the great or I don't know, like a lot of improvements currently in system which have made the generation of code very easy and fast. And the instructions that you give, it follows very accurately all of those instructions, right? So, see, I try to see how we can use it in our normal code generation, how we can make sure that anything that we are working on today, we can start using AI as part of it. Because deadlines are always something that we cannot change, right? So we started focusing on how we can make sure that that part doesn't change. We improve this side of the equation where we make sure that the output is faster, it's more accurate, there are lesser bugs, right? So we started exploring how we can use AI to build the product itself. And for that, we started exploring a lot of models, a lot of IDs, a lot of tools which are available, either open source, closed source.
Got it.
Like, so
Yeah.
moving around.
Yeah. So, guys, what makes this session interesting is it's not about vibe coding. This is about how to ship production grade software on an existing project and a setup which can be as a discipline scaled across team organization. That's what this is about. If not, there are a lot of vibe coding sessions that are there available outside. They do a better job than us. So this is about these three things, right? So how did your exploration start? Can you briefly talk about if I were to say tools?
Yeah, I mean, mostly started with exploring the current limitations or current structure of the models, right? Where we have reached. And I'm talking about, let's say, 2 months back, right? So let's say, I don't know, April, March, right? March end. So from that point till this point, there's been huge improvements, but still, we started exploring then. And we started to see what are the limitations of the current system that models have, and how can we work with it to make sure that we augment the current system of development itself, that 10x jump that we keep discussing, right? How to get it faster. That's what we started to see as a way when we started exploring these tools.
To make it a little crisper, can you talk about the IDs that you tried, the LLMs, MCPs, etc., etc.?
So yeah, we started exploring with OpenAI only, right? Like the model, the output was code, but the still the cost is very high, and the integrations with the tool was limited. Plus the output was okay, like it was not that good. So we started exploring different models like Anthropic, Sonnet 3.7, 3.5, right, and Google Flash, and then we started exploring all of these IDEs like Cursor, Windsurf, open source tools like Line, Rookline, all of these tools, plus a combination of models together, right? Like, let's say, a open source tool plus a combination of model like 3.7, Anthropic versus DeepSeek, right? So there was a huge difference in the output of these models. The exploration was focusing on which model produces a better output, how does it produce this better output based on the same type of prompts and same type of code base. So all of these conditions remain same. The output was different. What's the difference between a paid tool where they are exploring or making it more, the output seems better, right? So, and how do we get this output and all of these models as free for everyone to explore and learn?
Mm-hmm. Got it, got it. So this is good. Like the big elephant in the room, like, when you say production grade, how do you judge it as production grade? Like, it is good enough to deploy to prod.
Right. See, production grade code. So basically the coding part is the only change, right? Like the part where we do rest of the SDLC process, like the code review, the testing part, the release part. Like let's say you have some staggered releases, or there's a system which checks for anomalies. So all of these parts still remain the same, right? So normally when you are writing code manually, the same thing happens where you write code based on the available context to you, or based on the available requirements to you, and that somebody will review and suggest to you changes or how can you make it better, right? So the same thing applies, right? So currently also these tools are writing code which is more accurate and more concise, and let's say follow your current project's rules and structures, right? So the output of these models, to make sure that it's production grade, we will follow the same process. We will make sure that we review the code and we ensure all of the rest of the parts of the SDLC process, like testing, making sure the critical piece of code is not something that you change a lot with this. A lot of these things will still remain the same, right? So the output, and to understand how you can make sure that this is production ready code, what we did was, because I keep reviewing a lot of PRs, right? I have context of everything that is happening in our product, right? So from that context, I was able to understand the code it's generating, how to make sure that the output is more in line with our project's guidelines, project structure. So we started building all of these rules around it. And once we started, it was not that good. It was not production ready code. It was generating something based on its own understanding. There was no rules to control the output of the behavior of the code that was coming out. So we started adding more rules to how it should generate, and that shaped up the output better, right? So as this keep happening, we understood that the output of current code that we are getting is on similar level as somebody, the junior dev, would write, and we started working with it to reach next level, right? So once or whenever we start using AI tools, treat them like as a junior dev joining your team who has just a fresher coming out of college, limited context, but let's say able to code based on internet or Google search. But working with them will help them grow, and that is when their productivity keeps increasing.
Got it, got it. See, two things that I can take out of what you just said. I mean, like, the engineering part is still with humans. Just the coding part is responsibly offloaded to AI, right? That's what's happening. And the second piece, like, when you said, like, it has context, right? Where does it get the context from? How does it know, like, what is the objective, etc., etc.? Like, human comes, like, he goes through the specs, etc., etc. So how does it happen here?
Right. So in the beginning, the context of the requirements will be present, because that's the same that you as a human will also have. But let's say the context of the whole project, why it was built, if it's like, let's say the documentation is not correct or something is not synced. So all of these engineers won't be able to figure out the current project's details, right? So that is the state it starts with. And as you work with it, you start building these memory banks or like just the context windows which can be leveraged every time you start again. Right? So let's say if you do task A today and you work with the LLM to make it understand some parts of your code, you understand that understanding has to be somewhere stored so that next time it can retrieve the understanding and work on it again, right? So we found that there are a lot of ways to do this. There's RAG, there's vector database, there's so many ways, right? But we found that plain English understanding of the code base in a structure that is more detailed than what you would write helps the LLM a lot. And it's very scalable because anyone can understand it. It's just plain English, right? The maintenance is very easy because the model itself is maintaining that context based on your interaction with the model. And as it learns about the project, it works with you, it starts growing. And once it grows, it will start giving you better output. All of this context that is supposedly just with human will also move towards the model to be able to read code which is more production grade.
So tell me about this. Like, it's no secret that, like, people don't document stuff properly. Like, so now you have a piece of code, like, it is in prod and it is documented but not up to the mark. Now AI comes in. You're saying this document is the source of truth. It won't get the whole context, no?
Yeah, in the beginning it won't. So even once you start working with it, it will start building that context with it, right? It grows as you make it work. Okay, that's what the same example I gave, right? A junior engineer to a mid-level engineer to a senior engineer. The development has to happen.
No, or what I was looking for is it possible to give the task of generating the
Yeah, that is okay. So you are saying like
so that like it only creates the specifications from the code and then you review the specifications. If it has missed something, like you fill in the gaps for it and then give it back, and then it has got better context.
yeah, so that can also be done if you it's just a so there are multiple ways. One is that quick and dirty, just get started, which is what I like to do, right? Whenever there's a new project, just quick and dirty, get started and see where you can reach. Once you have found the limit that you can do with just doing quick and dirty, then you can focus a little bit more on optimizing how to build this context and all of that. But yeah, let's say if you want to do that, there's a very simple way to do it. Let's say the client or some model you are using, with that you can just start some commands like initialize memory bank. It's mentioned in cookbook how to use all of this, right? So once you do that, then it will read the current code base, figure out all the things it can, and generally generate a very accurate understanding of the code base from the data it can infer. It will try to traverse all the files, it will traverse all the markdown files, comments, everything, and then generate a good knowledge base for the getting started part.
Great. So so you got this thing working personally, like for you to ship code. So that is one thing. Versus like getting like distilling everything that you have done as a set of tools, process, and getting it beyond you, like probably your team, other teams. How did you go about it? Like so because in the earlier world, like of course we pay for SaaS and all. Now there is one additional SaaS layer, if I were to call it that way, right? The IDs are expensive, like monthly you have to pay, and LLMs are metered, right? That's an additional cost. So what's the story about that?
So see, when we were exploring all of these tools, right, spent a lot of money on it. Yeah, right. As you were saying, there's everything has a cost, and currently all of these models have cost. The better the model is, the higher the cost is, right? Let's say Anthropic 3.7 currently generates best code and is able to use tools well, is able to interact with the tools well. It's built for coding. All of that is there. But the cost is high. So we explored a lot of models and IDs like Cursor, Windsurf, and there were other paid tools, right? Anthropic also has paid tool. Anthropic CLI is there. So we explored everything, and what I learned was that, see, these won't scale for um, a lot of things because you can try them for free, right? If it's not just about like you can pay or not pay, like yeah, you can definitely pay, but it's like the things which you can try for free, there are higher chances of you trying it out. And if there are more users to something which is available, then the better the thing gets, right? Like that's the idea. And I started to see like how can I make this work across the team, right? What kind of things would require to make it work across one project where a group of people are working together, and how can we make it cheap, fast? All of these constraints were there, and we wanted to make sure these constraints get solved. So I started looking into open source tools like Line, and I started thinking about this IDE wars, right? Where there was VS Code, there was Atom, there were so many IDEs, but in the end, VS Code, because it worked so well, being free, having a marketplace, all of that, that it's still popular, is being used heavily, all of it. Right? So we started exploring, the similar lines. How can we give the similar output of, let's say, paid tool in a free tool, right? So what's the difference between those? So mostly it was the model which was being available. Let's say if Android Anthropic 3.7 is available, is there any comparable model for free which people can use and explore things out, maybe for officially or even for their personal projects, right? So let's say Klein plus one of the free models like Gemini 2.5 experimental or 2.5 Flash. All these are available for free. Let's DeepSeek. Also, there are some models that are available for free. There are so many open routed providers which give free models access, right? So we thought like there's so much available for free. How can we um, use these things? But they have their own limitations, right? They have rate limits. At an org level, you need a little bit more throughput so that you can run bigger tasks and have this teamers option. So we talked to Google, and we have this org-wide account that we started exploring and using. And there we have higher throughputs and higher rate limits. So we use this Pro Preview model,
Great.
right, which is provided by Google for let's say enterprise accounts, and that's what we have for JustPay. So we use that, and we don't face rate limits, or there's a higher throughputs. You can have bigger windows of context in it, right? So that's like not that big, but since the rate limit is higher, we can add more things to it. So
Got it. Got it. So the summary is the ID free. The plugin client is a plugin.
Yeah,
Yeah, the plugin is free, and the metered the thing that you discovered is actually the brain is the LLM, right? And that you keep on changing to whatever is best. And for now, you have chosen a Gemini Pro 2.5, and it is metered at the org level.
And it's a very cheap cost of token context.
Got it.
The output is comparable to 3.7.
Got it. Got it.
And it's a huge context window, 1 million, which is very required like for us to properly develop things. Bigger context window really helps.
Understood. So now the most exciting part. So Sachin, can you show your cookbook? Like, can you spend a few minutes to set it up and show the whole process?
Sure. So we will go through how to set up client, how to use it, how to configure some of the MCPs, and where can you get help, right? Any documentations that can reference, and how to use it effectively. We'll just go through those concepts quickly. To set up client in VS Code or any of the IDE editors that you are using, which are based on VS Code, you can go to extensions, search for client, and from here you can install client, right? Because I've already installed, it shows like this. Once installation is done, it will show up like this, and you will need to set it up. So you will have to choose a correct provider for your use case. There are a lot of providers like Open Router, Google Gemini, Vertex, Requestly, right? So there are like so many providers available. From one of these providers, we can access any models to explore or to use. For our internal use case, we have Google Gemini models available, which are like part of our paid plan, right? So we can use them to set up Gemini. You'll have to go to uh, Gemini API. Um, Click on Get API key and select one project, and you can generate the API key. Once you have generated the API key, it will be visible to you here. Copy the key, paste it here, and from the list of the models, you have to choose Pro Preview or Pro EXP. Pro Preview is the paid model, Pro EXP is the free model. So we'll have higher thresholds, higher rate limits for Pro Preview. If you face rate limits, use this. Right. Once you are done, this is the interface. Um, Next step would be to set up a memory bank instruction so that you can better use the tool, right? So as it is, this tool is usable, but it won't be that much effective for your project or the things that you're working on right now. To make it more effective, we will have to go to this docs.client.bot and go to client memory bank. Here's the copy button. We copy and we set up the custom instructions here, right? So these instructions are just a representation of what works best in as a default, right? So as you grow your understanding or as the project grows, you can always improve it. Like how I have improved it, I from client to I have made it Jarvis, and there are a lot of other customizations that I've added. All of these are available in our um, Confluence doc. Right? So these are all the instructions, and we keep updating it as we find more things. We share this across the team for team to use and leverage learnings that other people would have found. Right? After this, let's set up some of the MCPs. Most of the issues that you face today get solved if you set up proper MCPs, and these MCPs will allow you to have better connection to your system, to other parts of the system that provides context, right? So you can just quickly go here and say click on install. Once you click on install, the MCP installation starts, right? So client takes care of installation of the MCP, which it provides from its own MCP servers, MCP stores. If in the third party server, that also can be added. We can just give the instructions to client here, and it will start working on the MCP, right? So right now it's trying to understand this MCP instructions and set it up. Started setting it up, I guess. Let's wait for it to finish. So it's like this issue that I'm facing right now can be solved by using a command line MCP. So things like this are possible if you extend the system. So and I purposely put this random word so that it can try and understand. See, it suggested was to be the placeholder. So it will continue in parallel. Let's um, set up the next thing, right? So we'll say initialize Memory bank. See, in parallel, it's working on setting up the MCP. We'll have to set up multiple MCPs for you to get different kinds of accesses. Yeah, it's initializing on desktop, which is weird. Yeah. Right. So you can set it up memory bank. So memory bank helps build context, which can be used by your team members, by the other CLI tools or other coding agents to understand the project and give faster, more accurate results, which you can trust, right? So memory bank is something that you should definitely set up for your project and make sure it grows as you build more things using AI tools and keep updating memory bank. It will act as a very good source of instructions for the AI to one shot your commands, right? The output that you're expecting will happen once the memory bank has good enough context.
Sure. Yeah, so this will definitely be helpful. Do you have any examples to share wherein A, it actually did stuff, B, it actually did it in, let's say, 1/10 of the cost or 1/10 of the time? Give us examples, Sachin, like where it is actually in action. Some examples.
See, I think like this might seem like a very um, wide example, but let's start from there, right? Let's say this is a dashboard which has a lot of pages. Um, the requirement was to support dark mode and light mode, right? But it's not a very priority ask, right? It's something that is good to have. So we started to see how we can make dark mode, light mode compatible design in the same dashboard without investing a lot of time in it. And for that, we started using the tooling. We asked it to go through all the pages, figure out how many types of colors do we use, and where do we use them. Are these in a common CSS file, or are they scattered around in the pages where they are used, right? So all of these conditions we gave it to them, and it was able to read through a lot of files and figure out all of these conditions. And then the next command was to understand all of this, right? Once we understand all of this, we asked to plan for how we can make it dark and light mode compatible, and how we can move all of these CSS variables to a common CSS files for our future use cases, right? So we planned all of this with it. There is plan mode and then there is act mode, right? So we focused on planning. This is the engineering part of it. We started going through the plan. We did some corrections on how it understood the problem, how it wanted to do the solution. And once the plan mode was finalized, plan mode took quite a bit of time, let's say 15-20 minutes, right? And we had to read through all of the planning part and understand what it's trying to do and make suggestions. Once it was done, and we choose to do actually start the code changes where we move to act mode, it started working on it, and the output was really good, right? For one shotting the output from plan to act, it was really, really good. And that took around 45 to 50 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And if an engineer were to do it, how much time would it have taken?
Just gathering the context part would have taken at least 2-3 days.
And actually, the coding part
Would have taken another week at least, I guess.
Yeah, Sachin, do you have any other example?
Yeah. So, see, one more example is that we wanted to make it responsive and more mobile friendly, right? So, we have this one more upcoming project where we need to have the dashboard working same as a native Android iOS application on mobile phone, and it should be able to be responsive to look how it's looking today in desktop. So this is also a complex example, right? There's a good number of screens, there's a huge number of components, each of them needs to have this compatibility. So this was also a very complex example. This took a bit of time because the complexity changes based on how each component should behave in phone versus desktop, right? So this took a lot of time on planning and few iterations on implementation also. But this was initial days when we were exploring and the models were still coming out. and we were able to get that done in 3 days, which would have taken at least a month, or 15 days at least. Like 15 days it would have taken for somebody to get it out and ready for testing. Like at least that part it would have taken.
Got it. This is cool. So now a bit about the organization part. So now you are fully convinced AI can code, right? So is your team using it? Are people outside of your team using it? Because in your team, of course, there is hierarchy. If you tell, they will have to somewhat listen to you. How's that going? Because why this is an important question is currently people, not everyone, but many think that particular developers, right? Like, they think it as a foe than a friend, right? I've seen this journey with content guys. Like, 1 year ago, they were in this phase. So now they are completely in love with AI. And at a different timeline, it happened to designers, right? So now, like, the first go-to thing for them also to get inspiration is like, they will do prompting. So I think devs are in that phase now. Like, so how did you address that piece? Because it's a very human angle there.
Right. So, like, how do you get it adopted in an organization, right? So we started with small understanding of the current system of AI, right? Like, where is the limit of the model? How can you use it? We discussed in meetings in the morning. We have around 70 people. We have morning sync ups, and there we started to show them what's possible, right? Some people got excited and they started exploring. Around 5-6 people got excited initially. They started exploring. They found that it's very helpful for them to understand some parts of the problem that it's working on. Let's say if you just give it a command and scans a code base and gives an output which is very contextual to your problem, that was helpful for them to just understand that it's able to do something, right? And then we started enforcing it to be used for Git messages because the context that comes out from an LLM after processing your changes is better than what you would have written manually generally, right? So we started exploring all of these small use cases and started extending it, right? We asked, like, you start using it for memory bank, then that became enforced in our team. And once we enforced that part, then we started exploring more things, like how can you improve? So we did one hackathon where a lot of people participated and they explored the limitations of their way of using these models, these tools, and how they improve, right? So after the hackathon itself, their productivity improved by 10x of what they were doing before.
Got it. So the key point is take smaller problem statements,
Right.
like get them to see the result, so that they have a first-hand experience of the advantage, and then go for a larger project or something like that.
Or more usage, right? So the exploration is primary, like where you explore and figure out which part of your immediate workflow can you quickly try and see how it can make it better.
Great. So this, do you think this will also work in other teams or like?
Right. So we did this cookbook videos and we shared that before. A lot of teams tried to explore and see if they can adopt it. I think Mohan's team is able to do it. Mohan is shared multiple examples, right? There's Arun Raj. His team is able to do it. He's also started to show how it can be used better to the team. They are working together on exploring more things, right? There's reverse output now. They are able to share what they found can be made better to other people. Devesh also has started exploring it. He has started seeing the traction in his team where people are able to get things done faster. There's more accurate results.
I couldn't resist myself asking this question. I saw somewhere Satya Nadella sharing that up to 30% of the code in Microsoft is shipped by AI. So where do we stand, and where do you see we will be going? I know we are in a very early stages.
Right. See, for me personally, because I have been working on it continuously, right? Like, it's so much fun that I have had like sleepless nights and all, and 2 hours sleep and all of that.
It's like a new toy that you
Yeah,
own.
and it's very fun to explore, right? So for me, I have reached around 70% code being generated using AI, right? There are some things here and there that I still do manually just to keep that coding spirit alive, right? And team-wise, I think around 40% we have reached, 30 to 40%. Maybe in next 4 to 6 months, we will. For me, I will personally reach 100%. That's my. I have other goals with it because that's the start of it, right? I have other plans with how to use this to grow more, and for the team, most likely will reach 70% in next 4 to 6 months.
That's very exciting, man.
Right.
70%. Wow. Let's see where we go. So, this is a very fast evolving space. So, how do you keep yourself updated with, where should the AI-enabled devs, get their inspiration from?
Software engineers, right, are engineers, right? So they have a lot of problems in the world or in their current organization that they can actually solve if there are things where they can focus on more than just writing code, right? So you should try and make yourself comfortable with this changing environment as much as possible. Try to adapt to it and start thinking from a creator mindset where creation and making sure that creation is successful, it's scalable, all of that is what you focus on. So personally, what I do or where I have reached till now is that now there are a lot of tasks that I'm able to do and I'm able to do them parallelly. So I run multiple things in parallel and then go and explore other things in AI world, right? Because the planning part or system architect part is something that I focus and get it done accurately in, let's say, first 30-40 minutes. And the implementation time, it takes, let's say, 1 hour or 15 minutes or 1 hour 15 minutes, right? So I try to leverage that time to learn more about AI and keep myself informed, right? That's how you hack it out, right? Like if there's multiple ways for you to do it, but this is what I do when the things are still going on in background.
Thanks a lot, Sachin. So please share this cookbook, the video with someone in your organization, particular to that guy who's a curious guy who's been trying to get the AI work but is not able to do it. He will definitely find this useful, and also probably to engineering leaders so that they can plant the AI seeds in their team. Before we wrap up, approach AI with curiosity and caution, right? Don't fall for vibe coder claims that AI will code everything. That is not the truth. Or at the same time, don't be dismissive about AI, right? This is a brave new world. This is the time to embrace exponentials. That's what Andrew says. Try the cookbook today, play with it. Most importantly, build your own intuition. Okay? Stuck somewhere? Please drop a comment.
Or maybe just ask ChatGPT for help once, right? It's able to answer most of your questions.
That's a good one. Thank you.